ICE to deport 600,000 Venezuelans. At least that's what it says here. As NYC migrants panic, by Cash Jordan. He's a legendary YouTuber. He's putting out some good content. Let me just give you an idea of how many people 600,000 is. These are countries in the world. Look how many have less than that. This is crazy. 35 people? All right. But I don't think we understand even how many people that is, especially in New York City. Let's have a look what's happening and whether this is actually going to happen, because you never know. It's all talk until the talk is done, right?
As ICE raids have been unfolding in major cities like Chicago and New York, the Trump administration has revoked temporary protected status for more than 600,000 Venezuelans in the United States.
600,000 people will soon have their protected status canceled, which means they could be eligible for deportation. And as the Trump administration ramps up ICE raids in sanctuary cities, many people living in places like New York are on edge, because in 45 days, they may need to be living somewhere else.
The prospect of more operations focused not just on violent criminals, but on the undocumented, has New York's immigrant population living in fear.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem called out former DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, accusing him of using temporary protected status, or TPS, as a loophole to let migrants stay here and violate the laws.
Definitely the fear is real.
Members of the notorious Tren de Araguas gang are increasingly drawn to sanctuary cities. It's Venezuela's largest criminal organization, linked to dozens of high-profile crimes in this country, like this apartment building takeover.
We're going to make our
I remember seeing some of that. It's just insanity.
community safer by targeting those who are in the country illegally that have criminal record. But if you force us into the community and not let us get the bad guy into jail, it means more collateral arrests, means more non-criminals being arrested, because when we find the bad guy, which we will, there's going to be others with them.
All right. This is the thing. That is so many people. And if this actually happens, it'll be a big shift in New York City. And look, if you come in this country, in the United States, you come here illegally, there's two different things, right? So there's two different opinions here. The one we can all agree on is this. If you come to the United States illegally and do illegal things, violence or whatever, it can be violence, stealing, theft, of course you need to go. This is obvious. And then the split decision is here, where people come illegally and they actually behave really well or add to the country. What do you think about that? Now, essentially, if you come in illegally, you have committed a crime. If you can't agree on that, there's something wrong. Now, then from like a moral standpoint, the idea is this. Are we moral, or is the U.S. Considering it's a moral thing to keep you here, or is it still not? I'm not telling you like what my opinion is. I'm just saying these are the two standpoints at the moment. And what do you think? Is it just too many coming in? If it was a small amount, it might be way easier to tolerate. But if it's not only a large amount of people, but also a large amount which have a cultural difference, this is an important one that people seem to forget. And you see a lot of it in Europe at the moment, where the culture simply doesn't match. It just won't match, and it creates tension. Hey, consider. What do you think?
So over 500,000 Venezuelans now have just a few weeks to figure out their plans, if they want to stay in America. But what none of the activists claiming that this is horrible news bother mentioning is that temporary protected status is just that. Temporary. And ICE doesn't have the personnel to deport everybody at once, which is why 100%. The border czar's made it clear he's prioritizing criminals and national security threats.
Makes perfect sense. Of course. Make streets safer. Why are we even talking about
First,
this?
some of whom are here benefiting from federal deportation protection on the grounds that their home countries are so dangerous. With so much gang violence, nobody could live there safely. But the problem is the criminals and gang members that destroyed some of these places are now here benefiting from a status that protects them from what they did to the places they used to live, while making it impossible to remove them from this country. However, that's about to change because in 45 days, federal rules that unknowingly help the wrong people hide in America will come to an end, about a year ahead of schedule, at which point everyone involved will have to decide whether to leave America on their own, apply for asylum, or hunker down in a sanctuary city like New York in violation of federal immigration law. An idea that gets riskier every single day as ICE raids continue across sanctuary cities at a pace nobody in this country thought was possible. Which brings us to the real reason activists and enemies of America's borders are so outraged by these recent decisions. Temporary protected status is a legal form of U.S. residency. The last administration kept extending that, and that, in combination with America's wide open borders, we now know was essentially being used to fast-track mass migration to our country at an unsustainable level. A situation that allowed gang members...
That's the key point. It's unsustainable. I don't think people are against the fact that people move here, but it's unsustainable and illegal, not done through the right way. And then when you have that with people who are illegal or criminals, it just becomes this mess in which any average person will just think, you know what, get rid of everything. This is too much. We've gone down too far. Just get rid of. Just solve it as fast as possible, which is get rid of everyone. That's the idea a lot of people are going to have.
And criminals to embed themselves in communities all over America.
Authorities arrested 20 people wanted on criminal charges. The enforcement actions happened in Washington Heights, Queens, and the Bronx, and that's where authorities took into custody Anderson Zambrano Pacheco, the reputed Venezuelan gang member.
These gang members were all caught in New York City apartments that they used as bases to plan and commit crime all over town.
It's just like, what the hell, man?
Not exactly nice guys. And they do this while exploiting other immigrants, as this gang's specialty is human trafficking, which, as you're about to see, has made their presence in America an absolute disaster for everybody in every way imaginable.
You yourself have stated that if there is a Venezuelan migrant community in a neighborhood, then there's likely the Tren de Aragua gang. Why?
Yes, ma'am, because instead of building their enterprise off of narcotics...
I don't think you can see Cass Jordan just behind me. He's it's so weird to see him at home, man. I'm sorry, but he's there. He's there
like a lot of other gangs. They built their entire enterprise off the backs of over 8 million Venezuelans fleeing Venezuela and other countries in South America.
So it's important to understand that the only reason these guys are even here is because starting in 2023, America's front door was wide open, and these guys came here posing as asylum seekers, fleeing exactly what it was that created most of this crisis to begin with, at least as far as Venezuela is concerned. But because of temporary protected status, some of these criminals, even if their asylum claim gets denied, they're still able to reside in the country and live here and work here. They can even get a normal job because TPS gives work authorization. But that's not what they're here for. Instead, they've come here to commit as much crime as possible, hitting levels that were not possible in Venezuela where they're from. And their ideas, their dreams, they're not the American dream at all, that's for sure.
And once the Tren de Aragua establishes a cell within a community, what's their end game? What happens next?
Their end game really is to govern and control that area. So they're going to seize areas, they're going to seize apartments, they're going to seize abandoned buildings, they're going to take over the migrant care centers, and their whole goal is to infiltrate themselves within the criminal underworld in that local area.
Something they're doing in parts of New York right now. If you walk around in Jackson Heights, Queens, you'll see flea markets set up on random sidewalks full of stolen goods. And we've had recent robbery patterns in Midtown Manhattan and in Central Park, which were traced back to these very criminals, some of whom were living in city-funded asylum shelters. But that's about to change because, as you're about to see, these gang members, they're no longer going to have this blanket protection, this temporary protected status that allows them to stay here when they shouldn't even be in the country to begin with.
The Trump administration has...
There's a lot of this term called suicidal empathy, where a lot of that still exists in a place like Europe. I think it's fading very quickly in the United States because it just doesn't hold water anymore. It fades way faster here in the United States than it has in Europe. In Europe, You see a lot of people being raped, being killed, literal terrorist acts, and they still think, yeah, but they're asylum seekers. Yeah, but their home country is doing terrible. Yeah, but at what point, do you just say, hey, you know what? Borders are closed. That's it. This is enough. These are my neighbors, women, men, daughters, sons. Can't even walk safely down the street. I'll give you a little example later of myself, because I grew up in Denmark and I saw the turn. I saw it go from one of the most peaceful places to not as peaceful. So
revoked temporary protected status for more than 600,000 Venezuelans in the United States, implemented by the Biden administration. TPS is a federal program that allows people from certain countries to live and work in the U.S. when it's deemed unsafe to return to their home country.
Why would it be unsafe to return to their home country? Well, it's because of what these gang members did, and these guys are now here benefiting from what they did back home. That doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense. In fact, as far as I understand, Venezuela became safer because they all went to the U.S., especially New York City. We're talking about Venezuela now, right? Again, anyone from Venezuela, what are you seeing in Venezuela? Has it become a bit safer, or are we off the mark on that one?
By protecting these criminals and treating them as victims of what they've already done.
Even if it hasn't become safer, it wouldn't really matter. These are criminals. And you're harboring them here because it might be unsafe for them in the country they made unsafe. This is like degeneracy thinking. It's just completely idiotic.
We've just enabled them, especially in sanctuary cities like New York, where in some cases we've moved these individuals into family-focused asylum shelters that have little kids and school-aged children there, who are now living down the hall from gang members who may be trying to recruit them or worse. But apparently the open U.S. border, that was such a huge opportunity for these Venezuelan gang members that it may have actually changed Venezuela forever. Why is Venezuela's crime rate falling? Well, it says right here, there's a major link between mass criminal migration and decreased crime over there. It says right here that the economy is so bad, criminals can't commit the same crime that they used to, which is why these criminals had to come here. This is a place, America, where they can commit all kinds of crime that a lot of us, and especially our leaders in places like New York, were just totally unprepared for.
The rollback means federal agents can now review all individuals who receive TPS, including members of the notorious Venezuelan gang Tren de Araguas. Noam also pointed to overwhelming public support.
Okay, so here's the thing. These gang members, they come here, they say that they're seeking asylum, but of course, they're not going to qualify because they're gang members. They might be dangerous. And ironically, because Venezuela is now safer and the humanitarian crisis down there is dying down, it's not really such a heartless thing to cancel temporary protected status when the protected status no longer even needs to apply. And the country is taking back people who are known gang members. This is something that people never thought was going to happen. Venezuela said, we don't want to take these people back. And they refused for quite some time, but now they are. And if people are extremely dangerous, too dangerous to be sent back to Venezuela because they could escape custody there and come back to America, the Trump administration wants to hold them in facilities like Guantanamo Bay, which to some people might sound really extreme, but you've got to understand, this gang, they didn't just use sanctuary cities like New York and places in Colorado to export crime to other areas of our country. They were actually using the protection we were giving them here to re-export crime to the entire world.
There was this one example I remember speaking to someone when I was living in New Zealand, and I had to explain the part of Denmark facing difficulties with this infinite open border migration policy, and everyone's welcome and we're a giving nation in some sense. I told him, look, I grew up in 91 in Denmark. Super peaceful place. You can walk down the street, even today, it's still very peaceful. But it has changed a lot. Now, let's jump right over the border to Sweden, which is an even worse example. They have literal no-go zones, many of them, where we're talking gangs are shooting at each other, grenades. this is Sweden. Like, if you know anything about Scandinavia, you know this is outrageous. It's outrageous. Same goes for Germany. Anyways, what he said was, hey, he was total pro immigration in any sense, really, for asylum seekers especially and so forth. He was like, look, once I got mugged, I think it was in Paris, I don't even remember, and still okay with it. But consider, these are people that live in peaceful places where they don't necessarily see that much of it. They aren't born and raised with it over multiple years. And that's where the terror, the mindset changes. Because when you're constantly having small aggressions, like minor aggressions, you walk down the street, someone's like, hey, what's up? These types of aggressions consistently over time, and they belong to a certain demographic, that's when you start changing your mind about what you feel about these people. Again, let me be clear, it's not all. Don't be an idiot. It's not an absolute to an entire race, but it's a culture that comes from this area, these types of people. You start thinking, hey, something is wrong. I personally grew up with Danes, with Middle Easterners. I never met a Dane that would grow up stealing scooters, but I did meet Middle Easterners that were stealing scooters. What are you going to tell me? You think these things match? There's a whole different topic about why the countries they're coming from shouldn't be in so much war, a lot of it sponsored by the United States, and a lot of them would probably want to actually stay in the countries they're in. You think a lot of these countries in the Middle East tolerate idiots like this? Not always. Sometimes it's more peaceful on certain streets in the Middle East than it might be in Sweden. Why? Because the Western countries are not putting their foot down towards idiocy, towards blatant crime, towards aggression. It's not even that. I'm sorry for taking so long, but this is such an annoying thing to watch many Western countries become cesspools of crime. Many of these things are not even on the part of government or police, but rather overall people in the city reacting to this idiocy. So for example, you could see an immigrant create some crime around in an area that's not like, it's not a gun or a knife where, God, you should really keep your distance. For sure, I get it. But dumb things like minor aggressions towards women where people are just not reacting anymore, or they don't gang together as a whatever you want to call it, to stop this thing. And so whenever crime or aggression or whatever is not stopped dead in its track, it will grow. It will continue. There's so much to this topic, you know. Why can't the Middle Easterners, in this case, integrate into a place like Sweden or Denmark? At least the minority that do create problems, because the majority don't. But why can't they? That's another topic, right? In the end, this entire mixing of places just doesn't work at the scale of which it's happening. I'm sorry, man. I'm sure a lot of people left after all my whole rant here, but I have personal experience with this, and I'm seeing it in the U.S., and I'm telling you, the U.S. should not follow the same footpath. It doesn't work. What did I do there? I'm sorry. Anyways, let's continue. Cass Jordan has some... I'm sure Cass Jordan is the most annoyed. Oh no, I muted it.
Were trafficking guns not only throughout New York City, but as far as Texas and Colorado, with plans to expand their network to Colombia. Ooh. The DA says this was a years-long investigation. 34 guns were recovered, including 4 semi-automatic.
So these guys were stockpiling weapons in their apartment. They were using those weapons to arm local criminals here in New York. They were going to send them across the country, and then they were going to send them to other countries. These guys were definitely not here for the American dream, that's for sure. But look at this. What they did come here for was to recruit new members. It says it right here, inside shelters in places like New York. And look at this. Here's a map. They came from Venezuela, and then they almost exclusively went to places where they knew they would be protected legally from deportation. Protection which they're still getting, by the way, in places like New York, because as a sanctuary city, we do not cooperate with the federal government when it comes to immigration matters. Police are banned from turning people over to them. Yet even though we know we've got these gang members living in some of our asylum shelters, as a sanctuary city, you've still got a massive number of people here who want to advocate on behalf of these gang members. They are so upset that ICE is going into apartments and pulling these people out of their communities where they've embedded themselves, where they're committing crime, and making these communities safer. For some reason, people here are really upset about that. And they are super upset with New York City's mayor for cooperating with the federal government.
Steve and Natasha, this memo went out to all city agencies, including schools, hospitals, and migrant shelters. And it tells these city employees that they can allow federal immigration officers onto city property if they, quote, feel reasonably threatened. The memo also warned that actively harboring or shielding an undocumented immigrant is a federal crime.
Yes, it is. You could get arrested if you go and do that. If you're going to block federal agents who have a warrant or need to go into a building to arrest somebody who's dangerous, if you stop them from going in there, you could be arrested. And if the mayor tells people to stand up to federal agents, he's now harboring criminals and he could be arrested. The border czar's already said that he's going to go after sanctuary city mayors who refuse to cooperate. But the situation in New York's really weird because here we've got a mayor who understands that gang members and criminals are a public safety problem. He wants to get rid of them, but now he's in trouble with the city council who doesn't want any of that. They want a leader here in New York to say that we are a sanctuary city, we are part of a resistance movement, and we're not going to cooperate and we're going to stand up to ICE. That's what they want. But look at this. You know who's very excited about these ICE raids? Parents of asylum seeker kids who live in shelters. This is somebody who lives at the Roosevelt Hotel. This is a hotel where we know there are gang members living in here. Look, here are photos of them. They call themselves Diablos de la 42.
The worst thing is, as far as I understand, that hotel in particular is paid by taxpayers, but Pakistanis own it. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's down here. Look at this. Stupid part is the Roosevelt. Oh, I gotta show you. Stupid part is the Roosevelt Hotel, Roosevelt, was found to be owned by Pakistani Corp. All that money paying for all those rooms didn't even stay in America. Does that make your blood boil?
They live in the Roosevelt Hotel. It says it right here. And these parents have no idea how this is allowed to happen. She is worried her sons will be pulled into gangs sprouting up in this place. And you know what? These deportations, these raids, they are not a threat to people who have a pending asylum case and were granted parole in the United States while they wait for that case to play out. Those folks, as long as they don't commit a crime, they've got nothing to worry about. But now the New York City resistance movement is gearing up to do everything they can to stop any action that would remove people from the country who aren't supposed to be here.
Why?
This memo is the first time we're seeing anything.
Or maybe I heard it incorrect, but the action to remove these idiots should continue.
That provides something different, that gives ICE additional leeway and kind of advertises a way for ICE to get in if they...
Let me be clear. By idiots, I mean I'm specifically targeting the people who make the United States worse through crime, whatever. The whole other thing is another topic.
They want to, and that's what's causing the panic.
Advertises a way for ICE to get in, telling city employees not to stand up to armed federal agents, advertises a way for ICE to get in. That's ridiculous. But one fascinating development here is that there has already been resistance towards local law enforcement crackdowns targeting these gang members inside the very shelters where we know they're residing. Here is a photo of the tent shelters at Randall's Island. These are in the process of being shut down, but we know that there's gang members living in there. There have been for quite some time. And the NYPD came here to raid this place, but you know what happened? Investigators believe private security guards tipped off people that were in the shelter that the NYPD was on the way. So the guards told them that the cops were on the way there, which would now be a federal crime. If the new border czar catches you doing that, he's going to put you in jail. And it looks like at the local level in New York, there is either no willpower or no law that would stop someone from aiding or embedding criminals who are here or impeding a police investigation. And some of our leaders are upset about all of this ICE activity, and they want the mayor to take a stronger stance against it because they do not like the idea of collateral arrests. If a gang member is located in an apartment and he's living with other people, they don't like the idea that everybody who's here unlawfully gets arrested. They're not interested in finding out why there's other people living with gang members. They don't care about that. They're just upset that somebody got arrested who wasn't a gang member.
The collateral arrests happen when we're looking for the bad guy. and we find others with them. And we have told ICE officers they're going to enforce the law. Unlike the last administration, we're not telling ICE agents, ignore the oath you took, ignore the immigration law. Your immigration officers enforce those laws.
The big question here to me is, why are there people living in an apartment with gang members? Why does a gang member feel safe being around the people that they're located with? These are the questions we need to ask, because those people very well may be connected to that gang member. They might be gang members that we just don't know about yet. We know that Tren de Araguas is here to grow their criminal empire, to recruit new people. This guy right here is one of the Tren de Aragua ringleaders from that Colorado apartment raid. And look at this. He was living in an apartment building in the Bronx across from a school. He's apparently this guy right here in the red. That's supposed to be him. We know he came to New York after the Colorado apartment raid. Why did he feel safe here, and why did other people feel safe with him? He had weapons inside the apartment that he was caught with. How come they were okay with living with somebody in an apartment where there were weapons? And you know something? This reveals that this whole issue of collateral arrests is actually a non-issue when you look at how these collateral arrests happen. One person is being sought out. They are found with others. Anyone who's with them who's also here illegally, yes, they're also arrested because that's immigration law. But look at how badly the mainstream media wants to get the border czar to say that these raids are really about rounding up everybody no matter who they are, which isn't the case.
Good enough. We need to find these people and take them off the street.
You talk about taking down the violent criminals, the gang members, but then the illegal immigrants at places like the car washes and other businesses.
Well, I think I said from day one, the president's been clear, we're concentrating on public safety threats and national security threats. Well, if you're in the country legally, you're not off the table, but you're not going to be a priority. But I'm sure the car wash, I'm not familiar with that operation, but I'm sure they're looking for a criminal, and they didn't find, they found others. But worksite enforcement is coming back.
So they need to go to these businesses to find people who they get a tip or who they know might be there. And if they show up at one of these places, whether the person's there, whether the person's not there, they had a reason to go. They know that they've entered the environment where that criminal, where that dangerous gang member is. And let's say you're here. Let's say you're in the country and you're not supposed to be here. Well, the best thing that you could do would be to separate yourself from these dangerous criminals who are armed, who ICE might be coming after. Because the best way to guarantee that ICE does not come to your business looking for a dangerous criminal is to not work with one. Simple as that.
I mean, right?
Then you don't have to be afraid if you're going to work, because ICE is only after the criminals. And the reason that this is important is because it makes these criminals toxic to pretty much everybody. You do not want to be around gang members, because gang members are now a magnet for law enforcement. But what do you think about 600,000 people losing their temporary protected status over the next few weeks? And why do you think that people are so upset that this temporary status is ending? It was temporary. It was going to end anyways. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Oops. Remember that, whatever that was. Oh, no. So the thing is this. Okay, the thing is this. 600,000 people is a large amount of people. But we now learn it's mainly people at the moment who are really creating trouble. And who can be against that? Let me tell you, the only people who are against this are people who've never been slapped in the face by one. And these people, right, who advocate, okay, yeah, but they can change and we should be accommodating and stuff. They don't, although they deserve a voice simply because they're part of the country, it's an idiotic voice. And it's because they haven't been in the trouble around them. Make them live in that neighborhood. Make them be mugged. Not make them, I mean, what I'm just saying is, without the experience, you can sound like you want the best for everyone when you don't understand the consequences. It's dumb. I've had friends in Denmark that have been pulled out of their car from Middle Easterners with machine guns and guns. And just lucky nothing happened, because my friends were targeted as being seen as another gang. And once they realized it wasn't another gang, they let them be. But still, this is the type of shit that happens. This is in a neighborhood. Like, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you right now. It's going to reveal my address. I don't know, whatever. I'm going to have to blur it out. But I'll show you. Copenhagen. Copenhagen. I'm going to tell you where this happened. Right here. Anyone who lives in Denmark knows exactly what this is. Now this area, funny enough, right? It happened right here. Oh my God. Let me find it. It's down here. Let's see if I can go up and see it. Oh, they're really doing a lot of work, huh? It was somewhere, it was right here in this parking lot behind here. Look at this, kids right here. There's a whole training park right here. It looks like a peaceful neighborhood, doesn't it? People with guns running around here. Kids. Let me tell you, man, this is no joke. You think it is because it's everyone deserves a life and a chance, and it's like, no, not everyone does. That's just the honest answer. Not everyone deserves that same graciousness that you give to others. It's beautiful that you have it, okay? But not everyone deserves it. Let me say, when you let crime that goes unpunished is flourishing crime. It will flourish around people like you. Game theory is one of my favorite theories. It's be kind, be forgiving, but not a pushover. What do you think? This is getting ridiculous, isn't it?